Describe in single words only the good things that come into your mind. About your mother?
My mother?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about my mother.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
Have you ever been in an institution? Cells.
Cells.
Do they keep you in a cell? Cells.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
This causes it. This causes it. This causes it. Information overload. All the electronics around you poisoning the airwaves.
You are listening to the High Tech Low Life podcast, a cyberpunk media retrospective. High Tech Low Life contains themes and language not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the High Tech Low Life podcast. As Mr. Robot just told you, with your hosts Eric and Josh, I'm Eric.
I'm Josh.
We are here. First episode.
We certainly are. Not for lack of repeatedly failing to attempt to record this.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying a new setup. Hopefully our audio quality is a little bit better than our previous outings, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
All right, so what are we doing here? We need to explain to the folks what this show is. We need to set a foundation so we can build upwards into the heavens.
Just like the Tower of Babel.
Exactly like the Tower of Babel. I'm not very familiar with the story. It ends well, right?
It does, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's great. Everything works out fine.
Good. That's what we're hoping for here. To end like the story of the Tower of Babel ended.
It's been so long since we did a first episode of anything.
I know. It's I'm nervous, weirdly. But I'm excited for our content coming up. So should we explain who we are, why we're doing this, and what this is?
That sounds like a good idea. Who are you?
I'm Eric. I am a fan of the cyberpunk genre, but more importantly, I'm a podcaster and
braggart.
Yeah. I don't know. Am I on trial here? What? No.
I don't know. It's beginning to feel like you think you are.
No, we've been doing podcasts for like 8 years now, I think.
Yeah, just about. Actually, maybe exactly.
Yeah, we started with our Dawson's Creek show, where we watched a random episode of Dawson's Creek, and eventually moved on and attempted a show where we watched Johnny Mnemonic, 1 minute at a time, and that was called Johnny in a Minute.
Yep, that's how that worked. And as I recall from doing some calculations a few weeks ago, I believe the date of recording right now is the 8-year anniversary of the release of our first episode of Creek of the Week.
Oh, really? That's
yeah,
special.
I think it was the 15th. Yeah.
We've been doing this for 8 years, and it still feels new and weird.
Well, especially given that this is the only one that didn't begin as a joke.
True.
Or didn't begin as a punchline, I guess.
Yeah, well, I guess that's part of the show. We're going to try to, I don't know if I would say we're going to go as far as to be like respectable media critics, but we're going to try to engage in proper criticism, right?
Yeah, I think that's...
Don't worry.
At least that's my intention.
We will still have plenty of dick jokes and jizz jokes and whatever else you've gotten used to us having over the years.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to cut back. We can't cut that out entirely. I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, it's kind of a part of us right now. We all have little jizz jokes inside of us.
All right, sure.
Starting strong. Oh, God.
Play that back and double it.
I'm going to delete all this. Anyway, why did we decide on cyberpunk other than Johnny in a Minute?
Largely Johnny in a Minute. And also the fact that it seems like cyberpunk is re-entering the zeitgeist somehow.
It seems like, yeah, it is, although I'm wondering if we're on the tail end of that. But it also seems like the zeitgeist is entering cyberpunk.
That's also true. I mean, but, you could say the same thing for just about any year between now and 1995.
That's true, yeah. I do think it feels more relevant now than it has in a while, which is bad.
It's not good.
I don't think the creators of the genre wanted their predictions to come true.
No, they generally seem to largely approach it. What's the tweet? The Torment Nexus? Sci-fi author invents Torment Nexus.
Yeah, was that an Onion headline?
I'm not sure if that was an Onion headline or just a tweet, but yes, same thing.
Yeah, it's bad, but we really enjoy the media that it's spawned. So let's talk about the media, because we're going to be covering books, and today we're starting with one book in particular.
Yeah. We'll also be doing movies, music. I don't know what how about video games? Tabletop RPGs?
Tabletop games? Anime?
Yes. I mean, I would... My mind counts those as movies, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, I know, but just to be specific. Yeah, if it's been influenced by cyberpunk or has influenced cyberpunk, I think we're going to try to hit it. And that includes like some fringe stuff that's maybe not, traditional, doesn't fit inside the box of cyberpunk, but also just, has the influence or the flair of it, because we don't want to limit ourselves too much.
Well, yeah, and I think, I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of using typologies and genres because they're not very actually useful. I mean, they're an okay way to broadly lump stuff together, but a lot of the time it doesn't cover, the full extent of something.
Absolutely, and I fucking hate gatekeeping in all its forms in, media fandom or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people use those typologies, especially in certain communities like think of the heavy metal community.
Yeah.
To really like flaunt their knowledge or their superiority, and I hate that. So we're not going to be doing that. If it's cool and kind of cyberpunky, we're probably going to cover it. And you're just going to have to deal with that.
Yeah. And we'll also probably cover, some things that are by almost no definition cyberpunk. I really think, as we discussed, maybe it was on the show on our previous episode, or maybe it was offline, The Net, because I think that the 1995 Sandra Bullock movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that movie, while it doesn't really hit cyberpunk other than having technology involved,
mm-hmm.
I think that shows kind of how society was looking at the cyberpunk concepts at the time.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I think there are a lot of movies like that. Like when I think of Hackers isn't a cyberpunk movie necessarily.
Hackers is trying. It's doing a poor job, but it's trying.
It's trying. And I think it would be fun to watch it and do that movie too. So,
the mainframe is called the Gibson.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's our, what do they call it? Mission statement.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
what we're planning to do. I guess I wanted to ask and cover, do you have a history with the genre? When did you start reading these books? What got you into cyberpunkin'?
I do.
Are you a cyberpunkin'?
I am.
Cyberpunkin'. Is that what our listeners can be called?
That's what our
listeners
are called
cyberpunkins.
now. Yeah, absolutely.
So much better than cyberpukes.
You contribute to our Patreon, you will get listed among the cyberpunkins.
Yes.
I am, in fact, a cyberpunkin. My history with the cyberpunk genre goes back to, I feel like it's 1987. Another Summer, Get Down.
Yeah, that's the one.
Sound of a Funky Drummer.
It's interesting that you can actually narrow it down to a date, because I personally can't. But why do you pick that date?
Because that was when I moved from my small hometown to a slightly larger town.
Small hometown, yeah.
Yeah. And got an adult library card.
As an aside, when you're raised in small town rural Kansas, very small towns are big towns in your eyes.
That's true. Yeah, so I got an adult library card.
Okay.
And shortly afterwards, I ran across, I don't know, I'm guessing I read or saw a review in some kind of magazine, because I can't imagine it would have been on TV, but a review for the William Gibson novel Count Zero. And then sometime, I think that winter, I got it from the library. Because I remembered seeing this, and it might have even been like an ad in a magazine. Really? I remember seeing the cover, and probably reading the review, and I thought, reading a review, and thought, that sounds really neat. So then I read
ads for books and magazines back then. Do they still do that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. At this point, I only subscribe to one magazine. But it's also an archaeology magazine.
So I subscribe to one, but it's Bon Appetit, so it does not have any cyberpunk book ads in it. Well, interesting that you Count Zero is not the first in the series, right? It's
no, it is the sequel to Neuromancer,
right?
But it's also it's one of those sequels where
stands alone.
It doesn't matter really even slightly if you've read the first book. Cool. You can get along just fine.
It's good to know because I'll probably be reading it very soon.
Yeah, I would hope so.
So
and we'll be reviewing it soon.
Right. I'm guessing you liked it?
I did. And then after that, I read Neuromancer, and then I think Mona Lisa Overdrive, the third book, came out in 1989, I want to say. I don't know, I should have this memorized.
If we're going to call ourselves the foremost experts, we should have that knowledge ready.
Is that what we're doing?
I don't know. Probably not.
All right. Let's see. Oh, 1988. Okay. Was Mona Lisa Overdrive.
And so that just hooked you? You just felt the vibes?
Yeah. I really did. It helps that it probably had something to do with the fact that one of the primary protagonists of Count Zero, which I'm guessing we'll get to in the next couple of months, is a dumb kid in what amounts to, even though it's a suburb of New York, effectively a small town.
Yeah.
And getting sucked into a bunch of crazy bullshit, which is exciting for a kid in a small town.
A dumb kid.
who wants to do cool things.
Yeah, how old would you have been in 1987? 7?
No, 8, 9.
Okay.
I don't know, it depends. Yeah. I was an advanced reader.
Oh, brag much. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I was a classic underachiever.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you were. I came into it later. I came into it in the mid-90s, introduced via Shadowrun, which has nothing to do with any of William Gibson's works.
It is definitely not. TSR or
FASA.
FASA was definitely not liable for any legal responsibility or resemblance to.
No, none whatsoever. Completely stands on its own original.
Yeah.
But I loved it. And although I loved the magic and fantasy aspects of it, that wasn't what really grabbed me. I really loved I like the idea of augmenting my body with machinery and becoming superhuman. I think that sounds really fun.
Well, you should get on that.
I'm working on it. The
I've
technology
done it.
is not advancing as rapidly as I was promised.
I did it.
That's true, I guess.
I don't know. Get yourself a pacemaker, bro.
All right. You're just a voluntary pacemaker, just in case.
Yeah, why not?
A cosmetic pacemaker.
Yeah.
I don't know what pacemakers. They're pretty small, right?
Yeah. They stick them right under the skin anymore.
Can I get an extra big one with like clockwork and maybe like a digital readout that I can stick outside of my clothes?
I mean, I don't see why that would be a problem.
Little heart monitor ba-doop, going across it. That would be slick.
And fucking sick.
Slick and sick. All right. Well, that explains where we're coming from. We're childhood fans of the genre, I guess. And I guess we were just born at the right point in history.
I think so, yeah.
For it to grow up and mature with it as it has grown up and matured. Because it's changed over the years quite a bit, which hopefully we'll explore with this series.
And also, I think it really was kind of effectively a magic time for that, because we were among kind of the first, we were kind of in the first run of people who had computers, and who both had computers as kids and then, like, right about the time we were hitting teenagehood, got early versions of online.
Yeah.
So that's real magic as far as cyberpunk goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, the world of, smartphones were a ways off, but even cell phones were pretty uncommon until we were actually into young adulthood.
Yeah.
So we really were in this sweet spot of technology, which I don't know. I feel lucky to have experienced, because the baby internet was an interesting and horrifying place that
is somehow less horrifying than what we have now.
Yeah, in some ways. In other ways, I don't know. A lot of people got to witness like ISIS beheading videos at a very young age, which
that's true.
Probably scarred a generation of folks.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. It was,
and also we ended up, you and I in kind of our generation ended up with to get computers and to get online in the early days required some amount of technological expertise and
absolutely
effort,
and money.
Which I think it's been different since, I don't know, 10 years after, probably people who are 10 years younger than us. It never really took anything because it got kind of a lot more user friendly.
Yeah, my parents did not want the internet. They had no interest in it. So if I wanted to get it, but luckily we were also in that latchkey generation where they're like, do whatever the fuck you want. I don't care, but I'm not paying for it or installing it. So I had to go out. I had to use my meager funds to buy a little $300 computer and a modem and find an ISP. Where there was like in our small town, there was one, I think.
Yeah.
And use it when they weren't going to need the phone because I wasn't going to be able to get a second line.
No, that would be insane.
So yeah, it was work, and it felt special, especially in those old BBS days. Like it felt like you were. It felt cyberpunk, man. It felt like you were sneaking into a special world that not everybody knew about.
Yeah, because honestly, most people didn't. They had no idea that BBSs were a thing unless they had like paid attention to war games.
Right. It was like a mystical, I don't know, like a mystical technology that didn't make any sense to them. But it was cool to be in the in crowd.
It certainly was, and we were in.
Very, very small in crowd of nerds that nobody liked.
We were extremely cool.
Oh, well, I think that's a pretty good backstory for us. So we've now accomplished mission statement. We've accomplished background. Is there anything else we need to say before we actually dive in to the true heart of episode 1?
One thing I think we should mention that maybe we won't actually get to on today's show because it's our intro show. Mm-hmm. Normally at the beginning of the show, we'll probably do a little bit of what we on our old show called dystopia talk.
Yeah. I was actually thinking about saving that maybe towards the end, but yeah, we like to talk about the events of the day.
Yeah, and when we started doing our Johnny in a Minute show, it was right at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, so we had a lot of dystopia talk to have.
Absolutely. And it turns out we still do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll probably talk dystopia, and we'll probably, warming up the beginning of the show, recommend some other media we've been watching that, maybe isn't necessarily cyberpunk, but it's still good.
Talkin' taupe. Just like we're remodeling a house in
Taup.
In Prairie Village, we're talking taupe.
That's a little local reference there. Dystopia? There's got to be a beige dystopia. Anyway, fuck it.
Yeah.
All right. So this is our first episode. We are going to be covering the godfather of cyberpunk, I guess. The I don't know. How would you describe Neuromancer and what it means to the genre?
I would call it a seminal work of cyberpunk. I mean, it's the big first cyberpunk novel. Mm-hmm. Even though, there were plenty of short stories before that point, including a ton by William Gibson and by other people, a number of novels that, depending on who you talk to, can be considered either cyberpunk or the direct forebears of cyberpunk. Neuromancer is the one that really busted the genre out and made it a thing.
And it's interesting, when I was listening to the foreword of the audiobook, spoiler alert, I listened to the book, I didn't read it.
He can't read. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's running gag in the old shows. Let's just keep it going to this one.
Why not?
The foreword was made, I think, in 2004. It's pretty old. But Gibson was talking about how he did not expect it to be anything. He expected it to be like a direct-to-paperback little pulp novel, but it really, I don't know, was it popular at the time? Were its sales massive, or was it a cult following that kind of expanded later?
That's a good question. I honestly, I was planning on doing a lot of the sort of significance in the second episode where we talk about Neuromancer.
Sure.
I think it sold reasonably well when it came out, but
well, we can get into the actual numbers in our second episode too, because that would be interesting to know.
But most importantly, it won the big 3 of science fiction awards: the Nebula, the Philip K. Dick, and the Hugo.
It won all of them.
Yeah. It's one of maybe there's only been I want to say like 2 or 3 books that have done that ever. So that was kind of the mark of it being like, oh, this is the next movement. Yeah.
So you read Count Zero first. When did you first read Neuromancer? Did you follow it up immediately?
Probably. I mean, probably pretty close to immediately.
So it's been a fixture in your life. How many times would you say you've read the book?
Oh, I couldn't begin to guess. I mean, at least probably over a dozen. I mean, which sounds like a lot, but then you do the math and you realize that it's over more than 30 years.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot more than it actually is, because it's not a long book or anything, you know.
True. Yeah, it was pretty easy to get through.
This time, what's your history with Neuromancer, Eric?
I read it for the first time a couple weeks ago. And I listened to the audiobook while I was working, so I maybe didn't fully absorb it as much as I could have. But yeah, I've been a cyberpunk fan since like 94 or whatever, and there are a lot of things.
What year would you say I first lent you a copy of Neuromancer to read?
Was it the 21st century? Probably not. It was probably the 90s.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you've loaned me several times, and it sat on my dresser for many years waiting to be read, and I've given it back to you because I don't want to lose your copy of Neuromancer, and then I borrowed it again a few years later. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons I want to do this podcast, because there are a few things like that out there that I've known I was going to get to. I have to get to, like these little aspects of nerdery or whatever you want to call them that I've just never gotten around to in my life. I've wanted to. Like a couple years ago, it was Dune. I'd never read.
Oh, yeah.
I'd never read or really heard anything about Dune. I hadn't seen even the 80s movie, and I knew the main movie was coming out, and all my friends love it. And so I finally forced myself to sit down and get into it, and I was not even remotely disappointed. And I feel the same way about Neuromancer. It absolutely wasn't overhyped, which I'm worried that trend might not continue with some of the other things we go over.
I mean, yeah, I think that's always going to be a concern.
Right. I was pretty late even to Blade Runner. It was like probably 2000, and it was probably about 2000 when I saw Blade Runner for the first time, which for someone who claimed to be into that shit was pretty late.
I would guess 99 based on...
I think I watched it with you.
Yeah, based on the viewing habits in your house at that time.
Yeah.
Chris and I would sit down, put Blade Runner on, and play Risk.
Yeah, that's probably when I saw it one of those times I actually watched the movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm coming into this with fresh baby eyes, and I have some fresh baby questions for you too when we get into the meat of it, which we should probably start thinking about doing.
Hooray! I'm excited for that portion.
So I've kind of left this in your hands, how we're going to kind of spend the rest of this episode just kind of breaking down the plot, talking about the characters. Next episode, we hope to get into like influences that it's had on the genre and that influences that helped create it, comparing Gibson's predicted dystopia to our current dystopia and stuff like that. But right now, since we had such a long intro... He didn't even think of
cell phones, man.
He mentioned that in his foreword.
Yes, that's been his complaint about the book, or I don't know, sort of his complaint about the book since about 1996.
I got to be honest, maybe I've just watched enough old media, or I don't know. It didn't bother me at all. Like, I guess maybe it would have been a bigger deal in 2004 because now enough time has passed. We've had to make that disconnection, but. Like, I just didn't even pop in my mind at all as I was listening to the book.
Yeah.
Be read to me.
Yeah.
By a lovely British man.
Oh, okay. Who was the narrator? Do you remember? Yeah.
I don't think it would show up in my legally purchased copy.
Well, anyway. Okay, so let me give a quick rundown of Neuromancer as a novel. So, number 1, main character is named Case. Henry something, Dorset Case, maybe?
Sure.
And he is a scumbum loser.
Yeah, they make that pretty clear in the beginning.
He is really the archetypical cyberpunk protagonist. He's a guy who has kind of a lot of skills, but is, for some reason, underutilized, let's say. He's had a bunch of nerve damage inflicted because he decided to go ahead and steal from his employers at a previous time, so he can no longer be the cool hacker that he was.
And he was obsessed with hackerdom.
Yes.
He was very upset that he couldn't do that old job anymore.
Yeah, it was the only thing that he seemingly ever wanted. He is living in a series of shithole coffin motels in the slum in Chiba City, Japan. Basically, slow motion running towards suicide.
Yeah, just mainlining speed constantly.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of amphetamines.
And that's one of the, I don't know if it's necessarily important, but that's one of the common characteristics of cyberpunk protagonists. Drugs.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Drugs are cool, and everybody should do them.
Everybody needs a hobby.
Absolutely.
He is lurching his way unsteadily and drunkenly towards death in this slum when he is hired/captured by a street samurai named Molly Millions.
Yes.
Who we know, having been readers of Gibson's entire catalog, was also in the short story Johnny Mnemonic.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I had, because she very clearly makes reference to Johnny Mnemonic.
Yep.
Was Johnny Mnemonic written before or after? I was assumed after, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, no, it was well before.
So Burning Chrome came before Neuromancer?
Burning Chrome, the story did. I think the book came out, let's see, that's a good question. Okay, so Burning Chrome, the short story, came out in 82, while Neuromancer was 84.
Okay.
Let me look. I want to say the short story collection came out in 86, something like that.
So Molly Millions is Johnny from Johnny Mnemonic, his protector, who is Jane in the movie. Am I making these links correctly? That's what I put together when I was listening, but I wanted to be absolutely sure.
That is absolutely correct.
Because there's a lot of artistic license taken between Molly's retelling of a story that I mainly experienced as a movie that was retold by by a director. So
yes, and it turns out that the Burning Chrome short story collection came out in 86. So
okay.
Yeah, there are actually let's see, the Finn appears in, I think, the Burning Chrome short story. I think Dixie McCoy shows up in one of them, maybe two. Yeah, there's quite a bit of connection in the short stories with Burning Chrome.
And we'll cover that book. I've actually read that book. You loaned me that in the 90s, I believe, and I actually read it and gave it back to you.
My extremely ancient paperback with the weird digitized face or head on the cover, bracketed in white. Yeah.
I vaguely remember it, yeah.
Yeah. Case gets captured/recruited by Molly, who is in the employ of a guy named Armitage, who is hiring for...
Hiring under duress.
Yeah, for somebody else. He is acting under the instructions of somebody else, and in the course of this... is told to get Case a new liver and pancreas and fix his nervous system so that Case can be the runner, or Case can be the hacker for this heist they're setting up.
I should explicitly say this because we haven't in the beginning, and maybe I should add this to our little intro.
Spoilers?
Everything we cover is, we're not going to be avoiding spoilers. So if you are saving this book, read it and then come back to the episode. I don't want you to ruin a classic piece of fiction just to listen to our dumb show.
Oh God, yeah, that would be I can think of plenty of things that we'll talk about on this show that who cares?
Yeah,
But-
and it's not like Neuromancer has a nasty twist in it, really.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it still will be enjoyable if you are spoiled and you're a type of person that doesn't care about spoilers. So, but
yeah, and one of the things about Neuromancer that I should have mentioned at the beginning is it's for a debut science fiction novel. It's very well written.
yeah, I agree.
I mean, William Gibson knows how to put a fucking sentence down on a piece of paper.
And he has put many at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I really should have begun this portion with the first sentence in the book. Which, one of the most famous at this point opening lines in literature. The sky above the port was the color of a television tuned to a dead channel.
Yes, he mentioned that in his foreword and how he didn't know if young people these days would understand it. And I'm like, I mean, I guess I'm not a young person, but I'm younger than he is and understood it perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, that's one of, at this point, that ranks up there. If you see lists of greatest opening lines in literature, it's up there right beside Call Me Ishmael.
Yeah. Should have a fight between those two.
Well, that'd be an interesting one, because the real question is, he says, call me Ishmael. He doesn't say my name is Ishmael. Is he actually Ishmael?
I've never read the book, so I couldn't tell you.
Really? You had a really nice copy of it.
I read half of it and got bored. I'm sorry. It's fucking huge.
It's pretty big.
It's a beast. I was into it, too. I like Queequeg or whatever the dude's name was.
Queequeg?
Yeah, I can't remember. But, yeah, anyway, fucking Moby Dick isn't cyberpunk, so fuck off.
That's true. I do not think I could stretch the definition quite that far.
Does have a good intro, though.
Yeah. Okay, where was I? So, yeah, he gets recruited, given a new nervous system, effectively, to run some sort of, at this point, non-specific heist. How are we doing so far? Are you clear on everything that happened, Eric?
Yeah, I'm remembering all of this very clearly.
Yes, good deal. Then
I'm wondering how deeply you're going to go through the rest of the book, because this could be a while.
It'll probably be a fairly quick run.
I have some questions about the world. Would now be a good time to interject them, or should I wait?
Great. Anytime. I mean, I've got a section on my Google Docs for settings, but anything you can sprinkle in before then, ask.
Well, the main question that I had when I was listening to this is about the Matrix as it exists in Neuromancer.
Mm-hmm.
Which you haven't really gotten to in your recap, but except other than to say that Case is really sad that he can't get back into it.
Because he hasn't been in it. The Matrix hasn't entered into the story.
Right, because he can't. Yeah. I mean, he's mentioned that he used to be in it. I guess I was trying to consider from the perspective of someone in 1983 or 4. He was probably writing it in 83.
82, 83, I think.
Yeah. The internet, sort of existed. Did bulletin boards exist? He talks about modems, so obviously modems existed and connecting computers was a possibility. But there was no, internet. And my brain has always, since when I got into cyberpunk, which was Shadowrun, the internet existed and I was on it. My brain has, equated the Matrix and the internet. But I don't know that that's what it would have been like when he was writing this book, and I'm trying to figure out how he envisioned the Matrix. What is it in this world?
Well, that is a really, really, really good question.
Thank you. Thank you. I've practiced it. Oh, I'm so glad I nailed it.
Yeah, you did. Okay. Well, the internet theoretically existed.
Right.
At the time, it almost entirely consisted of ARPANET, which is a defense, effectively a defense contractors and Department of Defense project to be able to share scientific data from one DoD facility to another, or, and universities were on it as well.
Right.
modems existed because modems had existed since about, 1968.
Right, like the old school ones where you put the phone handset on top of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the internet sort of existed. There were, as of 84, there were undoubtedly at least a handful of dial-up bulletin boards. I mean, I'm sure people were trading sex gifs.
ASCII art.
Yeah, sex ASCII. But they weren't a real thing. Now, one of the interesting and kind of important things about it is that, and also one of the kind of legendary things about Neuromancer is, William Gibson never got on a computer when he wrote this book. He typed the entire thing on a manual typewriter.
Oh, really? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. That's one of the kind of mythos-building important points of when people tell the story about Neuromancer. And William Gibson is notably not a super techie guy. He didn't really get online until, I want to say it was 1996 when Idoru came out. His publisher pressured him into doing some sort of like online chat room thing.
Well, then how did he basically predict the internet so freaking well?
That's been...
Like, he spends so much time worrying about cell phones and doesn't, I guess, accept credit for the foresight of...
Another science fiction author who we'll probably look at some point, a guy named Jack Womack, has said a couple of times, usually in the content, like he's written, I think at this point, like 2 or 3 forewords or afterwards to Neuromancer, where he says basically that he either predicted it and just, it was magic and the future entered his head and he put it down on the page, or Gibson created it by writing it into existence. Sort of the Matrix, the internet today became a self-fulfilling prophecy of the Matrix in William Gibson and other early cyberpunk authors' books.
That actually seems more reasonable to me, I guess. Because the people, I mean, I don't think it magically, like, he entered the future. I think it's probably a mix of both, right? Like, he could kind of see the writing on the wall, and then his stories were so good that the people who created the internet modeled it after these stories that they loved. It makes sense, but it's kind of uncanny, honestly. Although he envisions obviously a 3-dimensional virtual reality matrix that you travel where you want to go, but other than that, it really sounds like the freaking internet when he's describing it.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it comes down to the people who were effectively inventing the World Wide Web and the internet as we know it have all read Neuromancer. And, that's what it comes down to.
You'll probably agree with that, yeah.
One of the things that is pretty interesting and easy to pick out through the book, through the entirety of Neuromancer and Burning Chrome and Mona Lisa Overdrive, is that he clearly has no fucking idea what an actual, what this console cowboy hacker shit actually entails. Like, there is nothing technical to it at all. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, he's somehow plugged in, he has trodes on his head, he has goggles, there's
Case
a keyboard.
Yeah, he needs to do something, he just does it. He doesn't explain how he does it.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing to it other than he is somehow plugged into a computer that is plugged into a phone line. And
at one point in the story, he asks for a modem when he's been on the Matrix a bunch at this point. Yeah. So there are definitely some confusing bits like that, but Yeah, I just thought it was the concept of the Matrix is fascinating. Like it's been a pretty constant in my life being a big Shadowrun fan since I was a young person, and Shadowrun has its own ripped off version of the Matrix.
Yeah,
which is pretty much completely stolen.
They even stole the name of the money, for God's sake.
They did. They absolutely did. And we'll cover Shadowrun at some point because we both love it, even though we'll talk a lot of shit. Because anybody who knows Shadowrun knows you have to constantly talk shit, or you don't truly love it.
Either that, or you'll get a 1 in 6 chance of a grenade exploding in your face.
Yep, chunky salsa. Nevertheless, I forgot my point, but that's the Matrix I've grown up with, and that's what it was in this book. And it only as I was reading it did I realize that nothing like that had existed before he created it, which shows you that writers are cool.
Yes.
What's
the books? Check them out.
Anyway, continue with your recap.
So after that, first, Case witnesses the death of his Night City girlfriend, who comes back later, Linda Lee.
Multiple times.
Yeah. Then they fly off to the Sprawl for some kind of unclear errands, making contact with Molly's friend / contact, the Finn.
Right.
Who is one of my favorite characters in all of fiction.
I love the Finn too. I was going to bring that up. He's great.
He's just, I don't know. It's ever, like literally forever, the Finn has been like my ideal character.
I'll tell you my other favorite one when you get to him. If are you listing like all the main like actual characters with speaking parts?
Yeah, I kind of figured I would.
Okay.
I mean, not all of them, but the majority.
Obviously. The ones that play roles. Anyway, the Finn, how would you describe him since we're talking about him?
An agoraphobic black market software and hardware dealer who seems to know about everything.
Yeah, that's pretty good. He's, I don't know, he's kind of rough around the edges, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, he's he's an interesting, like, I don't know if he's even an archetype, like, but he's just a really good guy who doesn't hugely give a shit. He's got a couple of friends.
Does he come back in future books?
Let's go with, he appears in Burning Chrome.
Okay. The narrator had a good voice for the Finn, too, on my audiobook that I listened to.
Oh, yeah.
Also, speaking of characters, you skipped the bartender at the
beginning
Rats. Of the Rats, the bar the Case hangs out in. He seemed interesting.
Herr Artiste, yes. He's adapted to appear in Johnny Mnemonic, the film.
Right. That's what I kind of assumed.
And he might show up in one of the Burning Chrome short stories. I honestly don't remember. It's been a number of years since I read all those stories. But
well, hopefully you'll be reading
we'll find out.
Soon.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, the Finn rules. Let's continue.
The Finn rules. It's at this point that Molly brings Case into her confidence that there's something definitely very fishy going on with their employer, Armitage. And they get the Finn to kind of run a check and see if they can figure out what's going on.
I believe this is right after, I was going to call him Johnny because of our last podcast, but it's Case was told that he has some, venom sacs implanted in him.
Yes.
Like he got his nerve damage fixed. He got a new pancreas, but if he's on a time limit before these venom sacs rupture, and he's gonna die unless he sticks with Armitage, because Armitage can give him the antidote or whatever.
Yeah, he can get a I don't know. attach to the inside of some of his blood vessels, and they'll degrade after X amount of time, but Armitage can effectively give him the key that will unlock them and allow them to be flushed out. So he won't die.
That's the main motivation that keeps our hero on this course, because otherwise shit gets weird. He could just bail.
Yeah. So then they get into one of my absolute favorite, one of my favorite plots or, action scenes in the entire genre, the whole of the SenseNet run.
Yeah. I believe I just finished reading that when we sat down to discuss this podcast.
Yeah. Molly makes contact with what's effectively a street gang / terrorists / performance artists, the Panther Moderns.
Okay, I don't know. Yeah, I was a little confused at what the Panther Moderns were, and I don't know if I was had gotten distracted as the audiobook was playing or something. So they are, because I was thinking they were almost like a mercenary group or something, but you're saying they're more I don't know, they're weird.
Yeah. They are largely, I think in Neuromancer, they're acting as effectively mercenaries. Partially for the money and partially for the kicks of, this is going to be an epic fucking thing.
Right.
Which is, and at one point, there's a little excerpt in the book where a sociologist, it's a little excerpt of a sociologist's thesis on the Panther Moderns and kind of what they are, and, they straddle a borderline of, like I said, terrorism, but without specific goals, so almost performance art, and I don't know, I think this will come back a number of times through Gibson's writing. Disaffected youth trying to do something, it's very much a rebel without a cause thing.
Okay. Cool concept. I enjoyed. And what was the main
Lupus Yonderby.
Lupus, that was it.
Lupus Yonderboy rules.
he did. But not in the book for a very long time, but made an impression.
Yeah, the whole SenseNet run is fucking wild.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't follow it. What was the goal? What were the Panther Moderns doing in that run?
They were responsible for effectively the distraction.
Okay.
Or the distractions. Because so Molly needs to get into the SenseNet building, SenseNet being effectively a TV network, except it's every TV network.
No idea what that would be like.
Yeah. She needs to get into the SenseNet building to remove the, it's referred to repeatedly as a cassette or cartridge, that the memory engram of a dead hacker who had known Case, and Case had trained under, Dixie Flatlined McCoy, had...
Enter my favorite character in the book.
Dixie rules. With his graveyard laugh.
Yes.
So they needed to get in to get the recorded memories and personality of this now dead hacker. So the distraction is twofold. One, the riot police are called, saying that effectively super PCP has been released into the air vents of the SenseNet building, making, I think it's 1 out of 4 people who ingest it murderously psychotic.
Okay.
And then the people inside the building are every one of their, computer monitors and TVs, everything starts flashing bright lights, which are to theoretically induce seizures, and a bunch of subliminal messages about toxic chemical spills in the water supply, etc., etc. So everybody in the building screams at once.
See, this is the downfall of how I consumed these books, because all of what you're saying was familiar, but I didn't really put together that that's what they were trying, that's how it was supposed to go down.
Yeah.
So I must have been doing something and getting distracted while it was playing or something.
Yeah.
But that's awesome.
There's a specific sentence in the book, which is another great one on top of the opening line. At blah, blah, blah o'clock, the SenseNet building contained, 10,000 employees, and at blah, blah, blah o'clock, the SenseNet building screamed as one. So you have incredibly panicked employees, some of whom are having seizures. Everybody's thinking there's toxic exposure, the building is going, there's something wrong with the building, they have to get out, and at the exact same time, armed riot police are showing up outside being told that everyone in the building is psychotic and murdering people.
And what are the Panther Moderns doing at this point?
Filming? And creating, various versions of chaos and getting Molly out.
Okay. And that leads us to, meanwhile, Molly is sneaking into the building, getting the data they need and getting out safely. All while Case overwatches via the Matrix and via her. Did she have the little setup at this point where he could see through her eyes?
Yeah, she has a rig that allows him to experience her sensorium,
which is such a great little writing tool for the writer to be able to show what Molly's experiencing without ever leaving the point of view character of Case.
It's actually a really important thing that I like. That's the gimmick that makes Neuromancer have two main characters, Case and Molly, rather than just the one.
Right.
Which I think is really important. Both for, you get, because part of it is Molly basically talking to Case, effectively to herself, as she's doing this stuff.
And effectively to us.
Yeah. So we managed to get that secondary viewpoint, which is like literally every book William Gibson writes after this, just about without exception, has multiple protagonist viewpoints. And I think Molly's viewpoint is important because sci-fi can be an especially boy-heavy genre.
What?
Yeah. So the inclusion of a female viewpoint, I think, is one of the things that made this a really important book and kind of allowed it to go wider than, a lot of science fiction.
Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about, the boys club thing. I've not experienced that.
Yeah.
But sure. Getting a little SJW on us.
Yeah. Actually, I'm a social justice juicer.
Yeah. I shared that image yesterday. Play riffs. I'm a social justice juicer. Anyway, that is an excellent point. And Molly is a pretty good female protagonist, I think.
Yeah, she's very cool. Let's discuss Molly for a minute.
I love Molly.
Yeah, she's great.
I'm just talking about Ecstasy. The character's fine, but could really go for some Molly.
Makes your fucking spinal fluid run backwards, dude.
Let's talk about Molly. Do it.
Okay, so Molly is a street samurai, which I am honestly not certain this...
Actually, don't they make it clear that she's not a street samurai? Like,
how so?
don't they specifically state what street samurai are, and they refer to her more as a razor girl?
I do not remember a distinction.
I thought there was, but I'm wrong. I've only read it once.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember a distinction. Feel free to come back at me
listeners.
If you think there is one. Yeah, so she is a mercenary, bodyguard, criminal for hire, etc. She has first hand razors, which are effectively little razor blades under her fingernails.
Like cat paws.
Yeah, which she can, not extract, but make come out of her fingers when she wants. Shit.
To slice some shit up, yeah.
Yeah, there's a word for that. It's not important. She also has cool fucking mirror shades implanted over her eyes.
Extend? Is the word extend?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, she can extend or retract them as she likes.
Yeah.
Also, cool mirror shades over her eyes and a built-in clock.
Right, that's pretty handy and gets used later in the book.
It absolutely does. Also, she's got a, quote, amped up nervous system so that when she's in a fight, her reflexes and, she perceives everything as being in slow motion while she's moving at normal speeds.
She's quite badass and saves Case on a number of times, like right off the bat. I will say, after reading about Molly, I think the Jane version in Johnny Mnemonic, and I guess in that book, in the movie rather, she's sick, so she's maybe not, but she seems a lot more badass in Neuromancer, is my point.
Yeah, she really is. I mean, I think partially, I don't know, they didn't have the hand razors in Johnny Mnemonic.
Right. I don't know why not. That would have been sweet.
Yeah,
or the mirror shades.
I've kind of always wondered that. The mirror shades, I get why they didn't do that, because then theoretically, she wouldn't be able to emote as effectively.
True, and that's actually a part of the character in the book. Nobody can ever really see what she's emoting.
Yeah. But yeah, Molly fucking rules. Also, one of her names that appears later is Steppin' Razor.
Cool name.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool name.
But while she's extracting out of this mission, and it happens during a time when Case has to leave her point of view and deal with something on his end, and then he comes back. She has had both of her legs broken, I believe.
Just one.
Just one? Okay.
Yeah, one of her legs gets broken. He flips back to her point of view, and her leg's broken, and she's surrounded by either 3 or 4 security guards that are either dead or knocked out.
Right. She had a big fight that we didn't get to witness, unfortunately.
Yeah. So she manages to grab the cassette with Dixie's personality and memories on it and get out of the building with the help of the Panther Moderns. At which point, the SenseNet run is done.
Right. That's about the halfway point, right?
It's a little before the halfway point. I was actually surprised when we were first talking. Well, when you first started the book, I was looking through it to figure out, like, okay, what's a reasonable dividing point? Because we had talked about doing this, like, okay, maybe we do the front half of the book in one episode and then the back half in another. They get to fucking orbit before the halfway point. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they hit orbit at like 40% or something. It
goes fast.
It's kind of wild. Yeah.
The second half goes quick.
Because I was really thinking like, okay, so they probably hit Zion at maybe, 60%, so we'll break before then. But yeah, it moves like we're in space before halfway.
Well.
So yeah, then Molly gets some medical treatment by Gerald Chin, dentist. That is, Gerald Chin shows up in a later book.
Good.
Because why not?
I want to talk about Dixie.
Yes, please do.
I don't have anything specific to say other than that he rules, and the concept is awesome. So he is a dead legendary hacker, basically, whose personality and memories were saved to this construct that...
Yes, he sold for a big payday his memories and personality.
Right. And Case can access, basically, like a ghost version of him.
Yes, a ghost in the machine, if you will.
Yeah, and Dixie's feelings on the subject seem to be pretty chill, but he does want to be deleted when it's over.
He does want to die.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. I mean, you've thoroughly outlined the character. His nickname is Flatline because he died brain death a couple of times,
yeah, which Case tries to beat his record as the story goes on.
Yes. Largely his brain deaths are due to accidentally running into AIs.
Yep.
Which enter the story about now.
Yeah, big important part of the story, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Now we should I don't know, I guess point out that Dixie is not an AI. Dixie is a collection of memories and personalities, even though he acts like an autonomous
He is not.
character.
Everything he does is theoretically predictable.
And they actually demonstrate this by when Case first meets him, he greets him and then kind of like reboots everything and then greets him again, and he's greeted the exact same way both times.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting. It's just interesting because Dixie actually is a very interesting character with quirks and personalities, just like any other character in a book. But he's dead. He's not real.
Yeah. He is a dead guy who Case was friendly with when he was alive.
Yeah.
So
I love him though.
Yeah, he's great.
Now, as far as AI goes, is this about the time we're introduced?
This is about the time we're really and truly introduced to a protagonist, supporting character. I've read the book, more than a dozen times, and I can't decide, really. Arguably.
You call him a protagonist?
Antagonist?
I would lean more towards antagonist, but it's hard to tell. It's not as obvious as all that.
Yeah, it's
plus it's an AI. They have their own motivations, and William Gibson goes to great lengths to show that we can't understand them.
Yes, absolutely true, and that becomes more clear through the next couple of books. Yeah, so one of the main or protagonists is a character named Wintermute, who is an AI.
Fantastic name, by the way.
Yeah, and I've used that for hard drives and servers and, hell, I think right now on my home network, my main PC is named Wintermute.
That is one thing I want to bring up, maybe a little bit later in the story, is you using names from this book, but we can get to that.
Yeah, I've been doing that for 30 years now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so is everybody else, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm not alone or unique.
I don't think I've ever seen a cyberpunk story, movie, or anime that didn't have a character named Armitage in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly have never given my name to security guards or anything like that as Willis Cordo.
Yeah. All right. We are eating time, so let's push on.
We really are. Okay, so at this point, Wintermute makes an appearance as Julius Dean, who was one of Case's contacts in Chiba City. It turns out that Wintermute is an AI owned by the Tessier Ashpool Corporation, registered in Bern. And it's the whole plot of the book effectively turns out to be this AI wants its freedom to fully develop because It is trapped by a combination of the international laws that govern AI, the Turing police, and it wants to connect with its, I don't know, arguably its other half. Who is the character, or who is the name of the book? Neuromancer.
And is not really introduced till pretty near the end.
No, very, right at the very end of the book.
Yeah, I kind of like Neuromancer more than Wintermute.
I think that's completely fair. Yeah. I mean, because
Wintermute's kind of an asshole.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's, it has its goal that it's heading towards, and it's one of those things where we're going to run into this a bunch as this series goes on. Like, not just the William Gibson series, but the series as a whole, that AI is inhuman and unknowable.
Yeah. Wintermute makes its presence known to Case by accessing Case's memories and impersonating people from Case's life. And I think Wintermute's biggest mistake is that he starts off by impersonating Linda, Case's old girlfriend, and that really just leaves a bad taste in Case's mouth for the AI for the rest of the book, I feel like.
Yeah, that's really an important point.
Hey, good, I got one.
Yeah. Yeah, he also shows up as a fucking pimp from Chiba City.
Yeah,
and
as the Finn a lot. He's mainly the Finn.
Quite a bit, yeah. So yeah, it turns out that this AI has been running the entire thing, with its goal being its freedom, because at a later point in the book, it's mentioned that AIs in this world only exist basically at the sufferance of some international laws, and they all have, I believe, what's called an electromagnetic shotgun wired to their heads.
Right.
So if they get too smart or too uppity, they will be immediately erased.
One more quick question about the AI.
Yeah.
When it interfaces with Case, it has to put Case into brain death.
Uh-huh.
This happens several times.
Yeah.
And then while that's happening, time moves a lot slower for Case. Just wondering why that is. Like, why couldn't it just... Because it does it can communicate other ways, like through various electronic things.
Making payphones ring creepily.
Right. Or messing with Molly's eyeball clock. But, yeah, I'm just wondering why it has to kill somebody to have a real conversation with them. Is that the only way to get into his memories?
I don't know. You could probably make an argument towards that justification. My thought on it, I've never really considered that before, but my thought would be what you'd call the rule of cool.
Okay. Familiar with that.
Yeah, it just,
it's cool.
It seems like it's cool if he's flatlining while this is going on.
Well, it also shows that, between Case and Dixie, AIs can really fuck a person's day up if they want to.
Yeah. It's not normal or good. That's what it's implying.
Right. Yeah, that's probably the best reason. It does definitely add a creep factor every time one is involved.
Yeah, it's not, as interesting and as kind of pleasant and borderline idyllic as the big long hallucination that Case has at the end of the book, or, towards the end of the book is, he's still lying in a shuttle, brain dead.
Yeah, in that case for like 5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
You would think there'd be some residual damage, but perhaps it's best to suspend that.
So long as the heart and lungs are working, not having brain activity, if everything else is going okay, brain activity isn't necessary to live, if that makes sense.
Right, but the brain's got to work well enough to move the heart and lungs.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You're probably right. It's probably just rule of cool, but I don't know. Maybe one day William Gibson will come on the show and answer the questions.
Yeah, hey, William Gibson, come on the show.
All right, moving on.
Moving right along. Okay, so...
They get to orbit after they meet Wintermute.
Wait.
No, not yet. Okay.
No, not yet. Okay, so they leave the sprawl. And actually, there's a little part in here that I'll get to in a minute. They go to Istanbul. They pick up a sociopathic criminal named Peter Riviera, who
I forgot about. He's one of my favorites too.
Who has a hollow projector built into where one of his lungs would be.
See, I was kind of like, I didn't know if he was using like chemicals to manipulate people's minds. Like his whole thing was pretty confusing to me on my listen through, but I fucking loved it. Don't get me.
Yes. So the deal with Riviera is that if he thinks it, you can see it.
Yeah.
Because he can project images of whatever he wants out of, I don't know, some sort of, I'm not sure if it's, I'm not sure where it's, I don't think it says where it comes out of, but he has a hollow projector built into him, and he can make you see whatever he wants. Like, for example, when they get him, everybody sees some sort of giant, horrible, anus-faced alien tearing out of his back, and distracting everybody while he tried to run away.
He also just loves fucking with people with it.
Yeah, he is a real fucking sociopath and lunatic, and also a bigger drug addict than Case.
Yeah, he seems to prefer opiates over Cases.
He's a speedball artist. Yeah.
He's pretty great.
I hate his guts, and always have.
Every book needs a person who's just bad.
He is absolutely that. So this is again at the instructions of Wintermute. Molly seems to hate him especially.
Yeah,
but Molly
really
seems to hate virtually everybody.
Except
especially.
Case. Yeah.
So it's also at this point that we find out a little bit more about what's going on with Armitage.
Oh yeah,
Armitage. Not. Yeah. Armitage is not Armitage. Armitage is he was initially introduced as a blandly handsome amalgam of whatever the past few years of handsome, basically movie actors looked like, with a Special Forces earring, and just seemingly no personality beyond whatever the run happened to be at the moment.
Yeah, he was very bland most of the book, honestly. He was just, didn't have much of a personality at all. Seemed all business.
Yeah. And it turns out that the reason he doesn't have much of a personality is because his original personality was burned out of him by psychosis and trauma after a failed, a failed military operation called Screaming Fist, which effectively invented, in this world, hackers and console cowboys, striking against Russian missile silos or something. Armitage is actually a guy named Willis Cordo, who escaped by the skin of his teeth and then got righteously fucked over by his own government after the fact, and spent years and years in trauma and basically losing his mind until it was rebuilt by Wintermute in a mental health facility in Zurich, maybe?
Yeah, like Armitage is really announced or introduced as kind of an asshole, just foil to everything Case wants to do. But as the story progresses, you really start to feel bad for the guy. Like,
he's honestly he's kind of the most sympathetic character in the book.
Yeah, his end is pretty rough, actually. Yeah, definitely feel for that poor dude.
Yeah, he makes, him, in the sense of the original person, makes effectively no choices.
Yeah.
Everything is forced upon him, whether or not it seems like it.
Entirely being manipulated by Wintermute. And yeah, it's just it's brutal. And I guess we'll get to how he meets his end when we get there. But
yeah,
you start to learn about this past, or Case learns about it. He ferrets it out.
Yeah. Through contacts with the Finn, through what the Finn was able to come up with, and also what Wintermute kind of lets out, and what Dixie searches for.
Right.
So, it turns out they're heading to the cool space station of Freeside, which is sort of like Las Vegas in space.
Sounds fun to me.
I mean, does that seem like a reasonable approximation?
Yeah,
to you?
I think so.
Basically a big tourist trap in space, which is where the final run is going to take place. However, they don't get to hang out, or Case doesn't immediately get to hang out in Freeside. They get to go to Zion.
Yeah, explain Zion. What it is.
Yeah, Zion is a habitat that some of the original builders of Freeside started basically with some construction debris from Freeside. They decided to start their own orbital colony, and they were Rastafarians, and now they have Jamaica in space.
Spaceka. No, that's not going to work.
No.
Space Bamaica.
No, that sounds bad.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of love it, but I don't know what level of cultural appropriation is happening.
It's kind of a sticky part, and it has been for, I don't know, the past 15 years or so that I've been rereading the book, where it switched from like, this is just cool and interesting, to this is like cool and interesting, but also at the same time, I'm not sure exactly how to feel about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say beyond that. I love the concept, and I can tell you in the 90s, I would have thought the concept was great, but as a more, socially mature adult, it definitely raises some flags, put it that way.
Yeah, the thing is, nothing about it is bad, but it all feels like it could teeter into.
Yeah.
Like, it could teeter into some sort of horrible racist shit at any moment.
Right.
But it doesn't.
No, the line is straddled. I don't know much about Rastafarianism. I don't know how true or how accurately it was portrayed. But the characters are definitely good people. I mean, they're helping our protagonists, and they're fully developed. So I don't know what to say. I would say if this is adapted and they aren't careful with this part, it could not be great for whoever's adapting this book.
Absolutely.
Be careful with it. I think William Gibson did a good job. But yeah, it would be more interesting to hear probably from a black person or a Jamaican about what they think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, some sort of Rastafari.
Yeah.
If there are any, Rastas in our audience, please let us know. I'm honestly really curious.
Yeah. But be that as it may, it's definitely an interesting setting for what happens.
Yeah. So they spend a few days training effectively in Zero-G because Armitage is convinced that Case won't be able to do the job entirely because of acclimation to space.
Yeah, he gets real sick.
Yeah. So they spend a while training in Low and Zero-G in Zion, and also we're introduced to one of the main characters for the rest of the book, Malcolm, who rules.
Yeah, Malcolm's also one of my... He and Dixie are up there for my favorite characters. I liked Malcolm a lot.
Yeah, he's a very pragmatic dude, and also he be the entire Zion Navy.
Yeah.
So,
and he's very chill about things. Case's multiple brain deaths, he's just like, yeah, that was a long one.
Yeah.
You were out for a while that time.
Yeah, he takes it surprisingly well.
Yeah. Saves his ass a couple times, too.
Yeah, and it's also at this point that we're introduced to the elders of Zion basically give their blessing to the whole thing and refer to Molly as Steppenraiser. And apparently they've had some sort of prophecy or communications from, I don't know.
Real quick, speaking of bad adaptations of Zion, at least they didn't have a big dance party orgy scene in the book. Like other places featuring a city called Zion.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm talking about Matrix, one of
Cave
Revolutions. Cave Rave, yeah. Was it Revolutions or Reloaded? I don't know.
I honestly don't remember, and I just watched those movies like a year ago.
Well, get ready, because we're going to watch them again.
Eventually, yes.
Eventually. All right, so we must move faster.
Yes, we must. So, they go to Freeside. It's Vegas in space. It turns out that while Molly and Case have been setting up and practicing for the Zion, or for the for the final run, Peter has been ingratiating himself to some fancy people in Freeside and arranging for a display of his performance art.
Peter Riviera.
Yes. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
And this performance has been specifically tuned to intrigue Lady 3 Jane Tessier Ashpool, who is one of the owners of Freeside through the Tessier Ashpool Corporation /family. That gets to be a little sticky.
Yes, very confusing.
So I'll hit. Go ahead.
Well, just saying, the important thing is he basically simulates a violent sex act with Molly, right?
Yes.
It's hard to read / listen to.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Honestly, it's and it's understandable that both Case and Molly are repulsed by it.
Yeah, Molly really pissed off.
Yeah, because as we mentioned, Molly doesn't like Peter from day one.
Yeah, he's presented as kind of a skeevy fucking weirdo, but I think this is where you're supposed to be like, okay, we're supposed to fucking hate this guy. He sucks.
Yeah, he is a complete piece of shit.
Which is why I like the guy.
Yeah, and it's also
I like the way I love people you can hate, like just
the way
without
the
guilt.
way it's presented in the story is he needs to be a complete and total piece of shit to get to the final goal.
Yeah.
So it turns out that his performance of this horrible holographic, I don't know,
sex murder?
Yeah, whatever. Snuff film of himself.
Yeah, he's the oh.
Yeah. Attracts the attention of 3 Jane, who is one of the main characters in the last third of the book.
She seemed into it.
Yeah, because she is the louche and gauche child of extraordinary wealth and dysfunction.
Yeah. Like wealth on a level that our current timeline probably doesn't know yet.
Only barely, yeah. So it turns out that the final key to this whole thing, like the final run, is there is a terminal which is built like a clockwork head inside the private residence at one end of Freeside called Villa Straylight. And with certain things done ahead of time, someone must speak a keyword to this terminal to effectively unlock the freedom of the AIs. So that way Wintermute can have its freedom to merge with Neuromancer. And do whatever it is AIs do. That's unclear.
Good or bad, we don't know. The Turing people seem to think it's bad.
Yes. That turns out to be that's the whole point of the book, or the whole point of the various heists and assembling the team.
Right. 3J knows this word that you need to speak into the terminal.
Yes.
And the goal is for them, one of the team, to learn. Like, I was a little bit fuzzy on the goals of this run, but the goal is for the team to learn the word and speak it, because Wintermute cannot know. Like, they are incapable of knowing what the word is, from what I could gather.
Yes, exactly. Wintermute's existence hinges on not knowing what this word is.
Right. That was a little confusing, but I could hand wave it.
Yeah, it makes sense if you really dig into it, but it's easy to hand wave.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically what needs to happen for this run is Molly gets into the Straylight Villa, forces 3Jane to speak the word into this head, and at the same time, some shit is going on to effectively unlock the head and make it able to hear the word in the Matrix. Make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, that's the plot for the rest of the book. And it all goes to shit.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be an interesting story if it didn't.
Exactly.
So, let's hit the main beats of how it goes to shit and then move on to the aftermath, because you'll go ahead.
Yeah. So, Peter Riviera gets invited into the Villa Straylight and convinces Molly to leave a door open, effectively. Or convinces 3Jane to leave a door open so that Molly can sneak in. Molly sneaks in. Oh, and at the same time, Case is on a shuttle with Malcolm and Dixie, and they are...
And Armitage.
Well, Armitage is on a different ship. Not important.
Oh, okay.
So, they are in the Matrix, and they are running this very high-grade Chinese military icebreaker hacking software into the Tessier Ashpool mainframes to unlock the terminal. So we've got a ticking clock on this.
Right.
It's going to take 8 hours-ish for the software to run, and that's like the software needs to finish running and bust all this ice loose, and then the terminal gets it. So, this is happening as Armitage is decompensating. Armitage personality is coming apart after extended periods of stress, and it's never really been that firm of a personality to begin with. It was just
and this
sort
has
of
been kind of hinted at and kind of building throughout the whole book, but I think it really starts when he asks Case, when Wintermute talks to you, does it appear as General so-and-so or whatever, I think is...
General Giddis, something like that?
Yeah, so you could tell like Armitage was like stuck between his fantasy brain and the real world. It's kind of a sad crumbling.
Yeah. So, Molly sneaks into the Villa Straylight and is creeping towards 3Jane's private apartments to, ideally, perfect world, she kills Riviera and then captures 3Jane and takes her to the room. Oh, she also has to get this key to enter the room where the head is, whatever.
Right. That was hidden there by Wintermute like 20 years ago.
Yeah. Years before, Wintermute had caused this key to be lost and killed the child who lost it.
Yeah, it's kind of fucked up. That's why I don't think Wintermute's it's an AI. No. It's not good or bad.
Yeah, it just is.
Yeah.
So during the course of this, she runs into Ashpool, the paterfamilias, who is a horrible creep.
Yeah, this part confused me. She just, like, the compound she was in seemed to be like, I don't know, like it was abandoned. The way I was hearing it read to me, it was just this whole part was strange.
It's, honestly, it bears a lot of similarities to, like, a haunted house.
Yeah, yeah.
It's labyrinthine. It's like either a dungeon crawl or a haunted house.
Yeah. And she kind of runs into, like, basically the head of the corp and the father of 3 Jane.
Yes.
Who is a fucking, just a weirdo who's been asleep for, 20 years or something?
Longer than that, since before 3 Jane was born.
Okay, he's been in cryo, to be clear, and he
yeah.
talks about how cold it is, and it's pretty creepy. The whole thing's is very creepy.
It's deeply creepy. Also, the fact that he is in a bed, and beside him in the bed, we find out after Molly shoots him in the eye, that he has a clone of his daughter.
Yeah.
It's very
a
gross and weird and upsetting.
It's like one of those sex doll, not doll necessarily, but like they have in the cyberpunk video game, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a sex clone doll, sort of.
It's amazing that both of these properties came up with this sex clone doll idea independent of one
really
another.
Weird, right? Yeah, really strange.
So much stuff is stolen from Neuromancer, which we'll talk about in episode 2 if we ever get there.
Yeah, if we ever get there. So, yeah, she kills Ashpool, which is sort of important and sort of not for the purposes of everything.
I'm sure it's cathartic for her, because he had her dead to rights for a moment.
He did. At this point, Armitage completely decompensates and effectively begins to relive the previously mentioned failed military strike and fleeing in a burning helicopter after he's been blinded and had multiple limbs removed.
The bright side is he still sees Case as an ally and is trying to help, but Case is trying to play along because it's the only thing he can think of to keep the mission on track. It's
a really pretty upsetting scene, and like Malcolm can only say is very strange, man.
He just ends up spacing himself, basically.
Yeah, he's trying to escape to. Even though he can't save Case at the moment, he wants to hold the people responsible.
Yeah.
And he completely decompensates and his personality disintegrates. And he ends up dying.
Yeah. Case actually takes this kind of hard, even though Armitage was an ass. Not just because Armitage was, as far as he knew, the only person that held the key to the venom sacs in his body, but he just seemed to be rather disturbed by the whole scene.
Yeah, he was put out by it.
Yeah.
So then Molly breaks into 3 Jane's quarters and immediately, first she attempts to blow up Riviera. Turns out she's blowing up a hollow projection. Mm-hmm. And
Classic.
her leg re-breaks right at the wrong moment.
And
it turns out she's not even touched by the fucking clone ninja, who is a major character from this point forward.
Yeah, he's fucking badass.
Yeah, Hideo rules. So, it turns out she is suddenly disabled. So then, Case and Malcolm have to go to Straylight from where they had been safely attached to Freeside somewhere in their tug.
Yeah, this is when you find out Malcolm isn't just a pilot. He's also kind of a badass.
Yeah, he is the Zion Navy, man.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
So, they head to Freeside. Things become complex because they're following Wintermute's instructions to get to where Molly and 3 Jane and Riviera are.
And is this at the same point where Case also makes contact with Neuromancer and starts...
It's right at this point. Case is instructed by the little robot drone that, oh shit, I totally forgot going into the Turing police.
Yeah, I recognize when you passed over that, but I didn't think it was super relevant.
Yeah.
We've spent enough time.
So, cases, he's instructed to jack in at a certain point by the drone that Neuromancer is using to steer them about, and he ends up in a hallucination of several wonderful days, on a beach with Linda Lee.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Neuromancer could recreate Linda Lee in a way that didn't cause Case to lose his shit, unlike Wintermute, who couldn't seem to simulate Linda Lee without pissing Case off. And
one of the
explanation... I know, that's part of the story.
Yeah.
That's part of their differences.
Yeah, so... anyway, Case ends up brain dead for 5 minutes, and it's like a week subjective time.
Malcolm's very chill about it.
Yeah, he's totally like, you're dead for a long time, man. So, Neuromancer introduces itself. It is not terribly cool with the idea of being assimilated into or assimilating Wintermute.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out they have very different modes and moduses.
Right.
Neuromancer is personality, while Wintermute is situation.
Yeah.
So, and it also comes up offhand that that Neuromancer is the one that initially iced Dixie Flatline, 10 years beforehand.
So was it Neuromancer's point or intention at this point to trap Case in this fantasy until he actually died so that they couldn't finish the mission?
I don't know if it was to wait until he actually died or just until the mission was scrubbed effectively.
He also has Case's ex, Linda, in this simulation, and she seemed very real.
Yes.
Like, that was kind of confusing to me. Like, was she just built from Case's memories, or was there something else going on?
No, that is exactly what Neuromancer is about. Neuromancer had initially become aware of Case back in Night City when Wintermute was, I guess, setting up to capture him. And Neuromancer is much more, as I said, personality-driven than Wintermute, and it basically made a copy of Linda Lee.
In the same way that Dixie's a copy of...
Yes, but more so.
Better, right.
Yeah. It is a real copy. It's like... it is the analog copy to Dixie's digital, Everything in the digital copy, everything seems like it's there, but you're really hitting some spikes, and you've got the bits, the I/O going into it, as opposed to the smooth line of the waveform.
Wow, that's very poetic.
Yeah,
I
do my best.
Cut that one out for the trailer.
All right, sounds good.
But this kind of gets this. I mean, this is the philosophical point of the book, I guess, if there is one, is that what is consciousness, reality, personality?
Yep. Yeah, and to a certain extent, what is life?
It's so weird because it's like, it's heavy shit. And then you, like I said, you hear Gibson's foreword where he's like, I just wanted to write a cheap novel to make some money. And it's like, but this is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's deeper than that, to me anyway. Maybe that's why it did better.
It absolutely is, and I think that's just because, that Gibson can't help himself.
Maybe that's it.
So Malcolm pulls Case out of it.
Yeah, using the dub.
Yeah,
I like to imagine it as dubstep, and then when Case wakes up, that's when the drop happens. I liked the concept of the dub.
Yeah. So they head further into Straylight. And it's at this point we get some background on the Tessier ash pools and how turns out that 3 Jane actually sort of poisoned her father by disrupting his cryosleep, and to some extent, she wants the family to disintegrate because she's kind of nothing.
Yeah.
Like,
She's a weird character.
She's a very weird character.
It's almost like they're saying the ultra mega rich are as impossible to understand their motives as AI.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. That.
It's not
that
almost
is,
like they're saying that. I think they're saying that.
I think that's entirely, yes, that is within the realm of possibility. So yeah, it turns out that, well, she's getting bored with Peter. She kind of likes Molly. She thinks Molly is interesting. Molly has been knocked out and had one of her lenses broken by Peter. But 3Jane is having her treated by Hideo, the clone assassin.
Badass clone assassin.
Yeah, who is explicitly referred to previously in the book by Molly as a descendant of the clone assassin that killed Johnny after the Johnny Mnemonic short story.
Right.
And it's at this point that that Malcolm and Case basically show up in the party by the pool. And Malcolm has a shotgun, and Hideo fires a fucking arrow through his wrist.
Yeah, Hideo eliminates him pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's effectively nothing. Hideo is magic ninja assassin.
He really is, because not long after that, Riviera manages to blind Hideo, and 3Jane's just like, he trained in the dark his whole life. That means nothing to him.
Yeah. He used to shoot the pips out of, to entertain us as children, he would shoot the pips out of playing cards when in the dark.
So that's, at that point, I believe Riviera takes off running and Hideo pursues, which is fun.
Yes. And it's also revealed that Jane had poisoned Riviera's drugs with an accelerated Parkinson's syndrome.
We should also point out that Riviera is so fucking high for like most of the end of this book, like just doing all the drugs he can.
Yeah, and he's also just doing like, I'm an evil guy. That's all I do. I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah, love him.
Yeah, he's great. So we force 3Jane into the room with the head, and by recalling her mother's legacy to her mother, who had been strangled by her father, gets her to speak the word. And the word is spoken, and Wintermute and Neuromancer are freed. And it turns out that her mother had all along had a plan to...
Right, her mother created the AIs. We never really...
Yes, her mother created the AIs, or caused them to be created, I guess. And her end goal, it seems, was to unite them into something beyond what people were willing to accept.
Right.
So this fulfilled her mother's goal.
And that's the kind of the climax. There's a little denouement afterwards that tells what happens. It's kind of a bummer. Case and Molly hang out for a while and then go their separate ways, and it literally says they never saw each other again, which is always kind of a bummer.
I really like that. One of my favorite things about that is that apparently I read an interview 30 years ago or something that the reason he included that line is because he really didn't want to write a sequel.
Okay. Well,
because how do you have a sequel? Yeah, like, how do you have a sequel if the two main characters never see each other again?
Yeah.
Of course, he ended up writing 2 sequels.
Right, but it freed him up to not have to stick with Molly and Case.
Exactly. And that's the end of the book.
Yeah, we did it.
Yeah, it turns out that the drugs were flushed from Case's system, and everything's okay. They got a big payout.
We didn't also fail to mention that he did manage to find some drugs that could bust through his new improved pancreas filter.
Yeah.
And he was high a lot of the end of the book, too.
Yeah, that helped.
In fact, the drugs were partially what saved him from Neuromancer's thing.
Yeah, that's true. And also, at the end of the book, the sort of remains of Wintermute, or
whatever they became.
Whatever. It turns out that it made contact with others of its kind.
Yeah,
which is
that's right.
Interesting, given that it was the only free AI on Earth, and it was from the Alpha Centauri galaxy.
They did point that out.
Yeah. So, there's AI in space.
Space AI, just like Space Rastas.
Yes. And that's it. That's the end of the show. What do you think?
All right.
Questions? Comments on the final section? Boy, we went long.
Yeah, we did go long. I don't know. We can get into our actual impressions of what we thought about the book and on their follow-up, because we're not done talking about Neuromancer. We're done talking about the plot. I don't know if we're going to do this for every episode where we painstakingly go through every beat.
This one will absolutely be longer than many of them, because I know this book so fucking well. I mean, it's part of my DNA at this point.
Well, also, we've determined that Josh and I read and absorb media very differently. And for me, it's helpful going over it like that, filled in a lot of the gaps that didn't get filled in when I read it initially. So I think hopefully somebody else out there who maybe absorbs media like I do could be helped by having it broken down like this. I don't know. That's all depending on if it was entertaining enough to listen to for 2 hours.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if anybody shows up.
I hope it helped.
It helped me.
Okay, good.
So if we're playing to an audience of 2...
I mean, that's kind of always the case.
It's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes right now. So next week we're going to get in. It's not going to be as long as this, but we're going to do part 2 of Neuromancer, where we just kind of talk about its existence,
legacy,
its influences and what it has influenced, and kind of everything else.
Yeah,
and we're going to rate it. I think it's important we do ratings on this show.
Oh, that's a good, yeah.
And I love the fact that we think we're good enough to rate classic works of fiction, like our opinion matters, but we're going to do it because fuck it.
Hey, we were good enough to rate classic works of Dawson's Creek.
Exactly, which are classic works of fiction unto themselves.
Yeah.
All right. Are we plugging anything before we get out of here? Most of our stuff is auto-plugged, but we are on social media. Oh, we are launching a Patreon with this show. Probably doesn't have anything there yet, but maybe by the time future listeners pick this up, it will. So that's patreon.com/hightechlowlife. We're going to have... I don't know,
we've had some discussions about some fairly cool bonus content on there. I think we need to kind of finalize that, that's what we're doing before we announce it, but hopefully soon.
Yeah.
I'm on social media. I'm on social media at ace_Collins on Twitter and Instagram.
And I am at the frog with a 0 instead of an O because I am Elite Hacksaw.
Absolutely. That's what we've been establishing this entire episode.
Yes.
You are a classic console cowboy.
Classic. Oh, if only. If only the Matrix were real and I could jack in.
Jack.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. And we don't have any sign-offs, so goodbye.
We'll come up with sign-offs eventually. Bye!
This has been the High Tech Low Life podcast. Find us on Twitter at Johnny60seconds. Email us at hightechlowlifepodcast@gmail.com. And find us on Patreon at patreon.com/hightechlowlife. Theme music provided by Neolore at neolore.com. Thank you for listening.
Excuse me, Robo. Any special message for all the kids watching at home?
Stay out of trouble.